Hey guys, welcome back. Since we're starting to get some warmer weather, I think here in mid-Michigan right now it's in the mid-60s, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about food plots in today's video. On the Whitetail Partners YouTube channel that I put together videos for, last week we talked about getting your soil tested, and in today's video I wanted to talk about frost seeding and why you might want to think about putting some additional seeds down to give your food plots a little bit of a boost. Even though right now, a little after 5 o'clock, we are in the mid-60s, a few days ago the temperature was below freezing, and this is going to happen a few more times throughout the spring. And for those of you guys that are wondering, what is frost seeding? It's when we're putting seeds down during that freeze-thaw cycle. So when the temperatures dip below freezing at night and then climb above freezing throughout the day. And this is nature's way of seeding, or God's way of seeding. So if we were not involved in the seeding process whatsoever, this is how Mother Nature would seed if she were to do it all by herself. Again, during late winter and throughout the spring, there are going to be times when the temperatures dip below freezing at night, but then climb to above freezing during the day. Again, this is called the freeze-thaw cycle. And for those of you guys that collect sap from maple trees to boil it down to make syrup, you know that this is a great time to collect it because during that freeze-thaw cycle is when the sap is really running. But why as food plotters should we care about the freeze-thaw cycle? Well, as the ground freezes and thaws, it's going to expand and contract. Very similar to how some of the potholes are made here in Michigan. During the winter, there's going to be some moisture that gets in those cracks, and when it freezes, that's going to expand that crack. And as that happens over and over again, you're left with a pothole. The same thing happens to the soil within our food plots, just on a much smaller scale. And again, this is God's way of seeding. As the temperatures dip below freezing and the soil expands, last year's seed is pulled into the soil, and when temperatures rise above freezing throughout the day, the soil then contracts, covering the seed. For us as food plotters, this is really good to know because we can take advantage of the freeze-thaw cycle to give our food plots a little bit of a boost to make sure that they're ready for the upcoming hunting season. And we kind of already talked about when you should be frost seeding your food plots during the freeze-thaw cycle. But this is going to be taking place during late winter and throughout the spring. So we have a lot of time to frost seed our food plots. And it's my recommendation to not frost seed your food plots too early, but instead, depending on where you're at, wait until maybe mid-spring to frost seed your food plots. As habitat managers or land managers, we always want to take advantage of any free time that we have to do habitat work. Anything that we can do to check off another item on our off-season to-do list, we're going to try to do it. But sometimes, depending on the project, we do need to be patient just so we don't end up wasting more time or wasting our resources. I follow a lot of like-minded individuals, guys that love habitat work on Instagram. I'm in a lot of habitat groups on Facebook, and I see a lot of guys frost seeding in January and February. And while this is okay sometimes, depending on your location, whether it's geographically or where your food plot is located within your habitat, sometimes it's better to wait before you frost seed your food plots, and we'll kind of get into why. If you have a fairly large perennial food plot, it's in an open field, in a fairly dry area, then I don't see a problem with frost seeding early on. But if you have a food plot that's either in the timber, or maybe you have a food plot that's in an area that's a little bit wetter, maybe it's in a swamp system that tends to flood during the spring, or maybe close to a creek or a river that tends to flood in the spring, then I really like to wait before I frost seed those areas. And it really just comes down to the fact that I don't want to waste resources or waste money on seed putting it down in an area where the seed's likely not going to get pulled into the soil. And first, the area that's a little bit wetter, that has a tendency to flood during the spring. If you're frost seeding in late winter, maybe there's still snow on the food plots, and then you get a really heavy melt and that area floods. The seed likely didn't have enough time to get pulled in the soil, and you have a good chance of that seed washing away. So if you're in an area that is a little wetter or is even prone to flooding, then I would wait to frost seed until that flood risk has gone down. I also mentioned those perennial plots that are within the timber or within cover. And these are a lot of times the food plots that we have on our properties, the ones that we're installing because the deer and bucks feel more comfortable moving to those during daylight. They're smaller plots, they're within the cover, and a lot of times they hit these plots before they move out to those destination fields. But I don't like to frost seed these until maybe later in the spring, like mid-spring, after the snow melts. And the reason is because a lot of times these plots during the fall, leaves fall down and they start to cover these small perennial plots. If you go in to frost seed your food plot that's within the cover and there happens to be snow on the plot, you might not know how many leaves are buried beneath the snow. And so if you seed on top of the snow, as that snow melts, your seeds are going to settle on top of those leaves. And so those leaves are going to act as a barrier, between your seed and the soil. So you're never going to get good seed to soil contact. Whenever we're seeding anything, it doesn't really matter the method, we need to make sure that we're getting good seed to soil contact. And if you're frost seeding your food plots within the cover too soon and you don't remove the leaves, you are not going to get good seed to soil contact. And that's the reason that I chose this location to film today's video, because I'm standing in about a 1/10 of an acre food plot that's within the cover, within the timber. And after the hunting season, when we came in here and after the snow melted, this area was covered with leaves. So I had to take the time to take the leaf blower and remove the leaves from this area. Now you can see, the rye is starting to come back, the clover is starting to come back a little bit, but it did not look like this a few weeks ago, prior to me taking the leaves off. And I'm not really sure if you can see it or not. I think that you can. This plot could use some frost seeding. There are some bare spots. And if I would have frost seeded on top of the snow a few weeks ago, my seeds would not have reached the soil, because as that snow melted, they would have settled on top of those leaves. So again, me personally, I don't normally frost seed my food plots in late winter. I tend to wait until the spring before I start putting down that additional seed to give my food plots a little bit of a boost. And if you're curious, what you can do is just Google the average last frost date for the closest city that your property is located to. And if I just look up, Grand Rapids, Michigan, average last frost date, it's right around the mid-April. So mid-April to the end of April every year is around the average last frost date. So here on my property, I still have just about a month to frost seed any food plots or maybe frost seed some switchgrass areas that I have treated last year. And we kind of already covered the why when it comes to frost seeding a few times throughout the video, but I'll touch on that again. Why should you consider frost seeding your perennial food plots on your property? And the answer is simple. It's just to give those food plots a little bit of a boost. So if you're noticing that in your food plots you're seeing some bare spots, frost seeding is a great way to fill in those bare spots, just to make sure that your food plot is hitting on all cylinders come hunting season. Also, if you're someone who's trying to establish a new switchgrass area, whether that's a new screen or maybe a bedding area, frost seeding is a great way to establish switchgrass as long as the area has been treated the year prior. Switchgrass does not really play well with others. It doesn't really do well with competition, so the area does have to be treated the year prior. But as long as you're bringing in, pretty much a weed-free area, frost seeding is a great way to establish or plant switchgrass. And I know that we're in the mid-60s right now, at least here in mid-Michigan, but just looking forward on the forecast, I can see a couple times within the next 10 days that the temperatures are going to dip below freezing. So there is still time to get out there and frost seed your food plots. And I'm sure that there's gonna be more times, here, at least in mid-Michigan, until probably the end of April. But that's going to do it for today's video, guys, and a few reasons why you might want to consider frost seeding your food plots. If you guys do have any questions, please drop those in the comment section below, and we will see you guys in the next video.